Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming. Well, you probably came to hear Chris Sanguin give a development update on what are the new features in Stack, but Chris can't be here today, so he has asked me to deliver the talk instead, and I'm hoping I can do it justice. So for those of you who don't know, Chris Sanguin is the person who created the Stack question type many years ago and still kind of has oversight of all the development. I am Tim Hunt. I'm a senior software developer at the Open University, and over the years I have contributed quite a lot to the Stack question type, not so much in the very recent years. So I've worked with Chris a lot, but I haven't done anything like as much as he has for Stack. So this developer update is basically focused on what are the new features in the recent versions of Stack, but also looking a bit more widely about what's going on in the Stack world. Oh, come on. There we go. So yes, in the Stack world, I mean, earlier this year in Estonia, and I think online, was the European Stack conference. And then just, I think it was last week, there was an African Stack conference in Kenya that Chris managed to go to, but I didn't. And also, basically, in the past, Stack has been very centered around Chris, and Chris realizes this is a risk. So he is taking active steps to kind of spread the responsibility. So now, instead of the Stack project being managed just by Chris, he has formed an international advisory board, which includes, I think, certainly includes Tim Lowe. Does it include Matty? I'm not sure. And anyway, so there's that. And also, more informally, he's trying to network together online all the people using Stack. So if you make significant use of Stack and are not already part of the network of Stack professionals, please reach out to Chris Sanguin and he will add you. It's an email list. So that's a good way to keep up with what's going on in the Stack world. So I'd recommend being part of that. So now we're going to look, there've been 3 minor updates to Stack this calendar year. And we're basically going to go through them and look at what's new that is significant. So the first one is a feature for question authors, which we'll look at in more on the next slide. And the other thing is, so hopefully you know that when you create a Stack question, you can also create some of what are called question tests, which sort of check that the question is working as intended. And there's a page where you manage those, and the sort of layout and functionality of that page has been improved a bit. So that should be a bit more usable. And when you're doing more elementary math and you want to display a multiplication sign, they've improved that display. So of those, the most exciting is probably the expression trees. So at the top, you have the mathematical expression, in algebraic notation. There is now an option to display that as a sort of rendered 2-dimensional expression tree structure. So if let me try and find, yeah. So in the Stack documentation, this is the page about that feature. So basically, what you put in your question text is something like that, the disp tree function, and then what you get out is a nicely displayed 2-dimensional kind of version of that as an expression tree. So if that's something you want, that is now possible. Let's go back to the slides. So that was the main new feature in the version of Stack that was released in January. Then in May, bit more stuff was released. Again, some more technical stuff like handling of if students' input contains Unicode. I don't actually know the details of that. Is that about like if they use the Unicode minus sign rather than the normal hyphen, making sure that's not graded wrong? I think it's that. The more significant change, if you're authoring questions, I mean, stack questions can be quite complicated, and what this improvement adds is on the editing form where you're setting up the question, there are now some extra text boxes where you can just record what the various bits of the question are doing, which will help if other people are working on you on the same questions, or as I always find with comments of the code, if the other person you're working with is your future self 6 months later, when you come back to this thing you did and think, what is this about? You can now leave notes for your future self so you can remember what the various bits of the questions do. Otherwise, they have no function, but actually they have a lot of very important function. The other one is significant. So with a stack question, when we're processing the student's response, there are these two separate concepts. There is what they typed valid? And then have they done it right? So the validity thing is, I mean, we're getting students to type some mathematical expression, and, you know, that has some syntax, and we don't really want to penalize them if they just can't quite remember the syntax, which is why when you type into stack, it immediately plays back what they typed in a sort of rendered form. We want the student to be able to express themselves in the right syntax, and only once they've entered what they think they're trying to enter do we actually grade it and mark it right or wrong. So as part of that, basically, as part of making sure the student has typed the type of thing you want to mark, there used to be some fixed options for that. Like, for example, if you were doing something with algebra, you had the option to say, we don't want students to type floating point numbers. We want all the fractions as fractions. And, you know, if they type a floating point number, we're just going to tell them, don't do that, fix it before we mark it. So now you can define some custom functions to do whatever validation you want to make sure the student have at least got as far as entering an answer in the right form before we start to judge it right or wrong. So previously, you could only do sort of new forms of validation by being a developer and changing the code. And now you have the ability to define these validation functions as a question author. So that is good. And then the final new thing is I think it was the new feature in Stack 4.4 now. As the author, there are various sorts of blocks you can put into the question text with various bits of functionality, and there's a new type of block for reveal. I think we're going to get that on the next slide. Yeah, so this is the bit about validation. And as I was saying, you can do this as a question author. It's no longer is the validation sort of built into the stack code. So you have quite a lot of control there. I don't think we've got a good example, have we? No. Right, that's it. The reveal block. So we've got a question that initially looks like this. The student inputs an answer to the first bit, and after they've answered the first bit, then some more of the question appears, and what appears depends on what they answered in the first part. Is there another? Yeah. So again, if they choose true here, they get this sort of next phase. If they answered false to the first bit, they get this sort of next phase. So this is more probably about, you know, using Stack as a teaching tool, being able to scaffold students through a process as they learn it. That's about the extent of what I know about that one. Again, all the new features are documented in the documentation, like the bit about trees was. So basically, no, this is possible, and if you want to use it, you will find in the documentation exactly how you do that as a question author. Right, so I think that's the update on what's new in the current Stack releases. This was version 4.4.3. There is also the most recent release is 4.4.4, but this really is just basically the same as this one, but with a few additional bug fixes that we wanted to release. And that's the very latest. I think it was released a few weeks ago. The other new feature is not actually a Stack feature. So I was talking about the earlier this year Stack conferences on a previous slide. And the other conference that has happened recently was a Moodle conference in Germany, well, actually, in Switzerland, the Moot Dach, so D for Germany, A for Austrian, and CH for Switzerland. So it's a German-speaking Moodle Moot, though actually it was about 50% in English. I was there, Chris was there, and a whole lot of German Moodlers, Stack users were there. So that was a really great week, including some other people from the steering group. And part of that conference is a 2-day, what they called a dev camp, where a whole bunch of developers got together and formed small teams. And I worked with Andreas, who is a Stack person. Oh, I've forgotten which university he's from. Anyway, I've never met him before, but we sat down together and over 2 days, we made this Moodle plugin. Actually, can I find it quickly? If I open a new tab, plugins. So something I think people in the Stack world have wanted for quite a long time is in Moodle, you can export questions into a text file and you can import them again. But when you do that, the imported question comes in as a new question. And for some things, it'd be really nice if you could just export the file to the XML format, open that in a text editor and maybe do a search and replace or some other change that's easier to do in a text editor than the question form, and then re-import it as the same question, and just make a new version of the same question. Well, with the plugin we created week before last, that's exactly what you can do. So this plugin exists. You can install it into your Moodle site if you have Moodle 4 or later. At the moment, it is very basic. I mean, we built it in 2 days. It works, but you try it and then you immediately think, well, wouldn't it be nice if it also did this, this, and this? And the plan is to add some more of the features later. Right, let's go back to the slides. Whoops. Where are the slides hiding? There we go. So that is that plugin. Yeah, and so speaking of other Stack developments, Chris Sanguin has just recruited a full-time developer to work with him in Edinburgh. So Chris can do more maths and other people can do, so this new developer can do more development. This person is starting in July, and Chris is thinking that actually making some enhancements to this new plugin is probably a nice, easy way for this new developer to learn, the basics of Moodle development and how Stack works. So that's that. So yeah. The summary is these latest versions of Stack now fully support Moodle 4 point whatever, which was a moderately big change. I think from the Moodle conference in Zurich, it was pretty clear that a lot of people this summer are upgrading from Moodle 3.x to Moodle 4.x if they haven't already. I mean, at the Open University, we're already on Moodle 4.1, but so Stack fully supports the latest Moodle releases. The latest improvements to Stack, they're kind of small things around the edges. The fundamentals of how Stack works hasn't really changed. There's no harm in that. We've got these useful new features, but at the moment, there are some coming in the pipeline. There are some bigger changes coming, but right now the latest releases are relatively small and safe to install, and they bring you the nice little improvements we've seen. But more coming in the future as ever, particularly once the new developer starts. And I think that's everything I had from Chris that I should cover. So please ask any questions now. And for questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can just grab the microphone and speak, whichever you feel more comfortable with.
So, do you have any examples for what you are using this display type, where you sort of look at the terms?
The expression tree.
Yeah, exactly.
No, embarrassingly, I don't have an example prepared of it being used in a question. Let me. I don't know if Chris does in the standard demos. Matty, do you know of a place we can find an example question?
I am not aware of an example, so this was mainly for debugging, as I understood.
Okay.
But it has a role in basic manipulation of algebraic expressions. But sorry, I don't know an example.
No, okay.
It might be possible to find sort of, I don't know, look in an expression whether it is contains a fractional or something like that. Could use it for things like that.
So basically, this is a display tool only. So if you want to search for a subtree in your expression, the existing tools are still there. And you just iterate over the tree and see if there's something that interests you. But we don't have general tools for asking the question whether it has a fraction.
I see.
You just have to go through the tree and see if it has a fraction.
Okay, I see. That still sounds interesting. And I'm really interested in this reveal function, because I think that's something I was looking for like for ages. That sounds really, really useful.
Yeah.
I don't know. We have a really like 1-year-old version which is not working properly. But in your version, is it possible to copy trees?
No, that's something Chris very much wants to find a way to do.
Yeah, I know. He talked to me
yes.
like 2 years ago about that.
I know, yes. And we talked about it when I saw him in Zurich. And but actually, I mean, the plugin we made about importing a question as a new version, that one of the reasons we wanted to start working on this plugin, and then we want to make it better, is the other thing Chris is thinking a lot about is the ability to share questions, share banks of questions between different people, and the ability to transfer questions between Moodle sites, updating the existing ones, is very important. So the import plugin is one small building block that will help create that whole solution, which is where Chris is trying to get to.
Yeah, and then there was something else I was looking for. I don't think it is basically a stack thing, but more like a Moodle thing. You can't save a question when it is broken.
Yes.
So I guess nothing changed with that problem.
Correct, yes. And again, that's one Chris and I have discussed a lot over the years. Well, only one small thing has changed, which is since Moodle 4 was released, different versions of questions can have different states. Basically, so in Moodle 4, Moodle keeps every version of the question, and those versions can either has a state that's either draft or ready.
Okay.
So it might be, and the reason we don't let you save a question that's broken is then if that was in a quiz, it would cause all sorts of errors. but actually it might be possible to let you save broken questions as long as it was being saved as a draft version that couldn't be used in a quiz.
I see.
So actually sorry, I've literally only just thought of that after you asked your question. So that would be something that, so I say, Chris, this is something we know would be really nice, but we've never been able to do it. Now that we have the idea of a draft version, it may become possible to add that in future. So again, it's kind of something we know would be valuable, but it's never been implemented yet.
I see. Okay, thank you.
That's okay. Tim in the chat has just asked if the importer's new version will ever become a standard part of standard Moodle rather than add-on. I think the answer is it might, but also since Chris and the Stack people want to continue developing it, it's going to be much easier to develop the plugin as a plugin outside the kind of discipline of Moodle core development. So I suspect it should stay as a plugin for a while we rapidly kind of innovate on how it works. And then once there's something that's kind of settled, we can consider adding it to Moodle core, because I think the import as version would be a very useful option in standard Moodle. And actually, Tim, maybe I shouldn't be doing this in public, but is that import as version something you'd like to see us adding in the OU's Moodle install?
I was being kind enough not to mention that, Tim, but yes, I think it might be useful, especially if you're updating a quiz and if students have attempted a quite formative quiz, you can check the questions the students have attempted it, but being asked to slot in a replacement question might be very useful.
Yes. At the moment, it's limited to only doing one question at a time, because that's where we started. The plan is to make it let you do it in bulk, but even one question at a time is useful. Yeah. Right, I will see if we can get that added to our Moodle install for you at some point. Okay, Colin.
Yes, it's not really a question, but yes, as I say, it's always useful seeing those developments. I suppose maybe something I'm doing is lazy, but getting a way to remind myself when we reach a particular version that yes, it can now do this, and this is how you can do it. It can now do this, and this is how you do it. That's a useful thing. Maybe I just need to bookmark back to the talk today. Development history. That looks good.
Yes, I'm just trying. Sorry, I was looking for that. Oh, there we go. It has the words. Yeah, so that has this summary list of every version and kind of the key points in it. So yes, if you know what you're going from, and as you can see, version 4 was a much bigger change, and then since then it's been quite stable. So it looks like I think you said you were there. So yes, I didn't really cover all the stuff in version 4.4.0, but
yes, 4.3.11. That's where I am. But I know that Stuart, our main developer, is considering, well, more than considering, we're planning an update. So I'm not sure how many versions up will go, but certainly reaching 4.4 would have quite a lot there.
I think if you are updating, you may as well go straight for the latest version.
Yes, it sounds logical, but might not be my decision.
No,
so.
well, quite, yes.
If it is, just don't stop at 4.4.0 because it has a couple of bugs.
Yeah.
That's why we have 4.4.1.
Yes.
Okay, I will pass that information to our developer.
Because as well as the kind of highlights here, all these releases will contain a few kind of boring bug fixes, but I mean, kind of changing from 4.3 point something to 4.4 point something is a big deal. Changing from 4.4 point something to 4.4 point something higher is probably relatively safe and probably a less buggy experience. I always say this, but when you're upgrading Stack is the moment where if you've taken the time to write question tests for all your questions, you get the payback. Because as the administrator, once the good practice is to have a copy of your main site where you can test the upgrade. So on that test site where you've got a copy of all your questions, you apply the new version of Stack, and then as admin, there's a place you can go to run all the tests on all the questions that will flag up if the change in Stack has caused a problem for any of your questions, or most of the common problems. So, we worked very hard over the years, and the message has got through at the OU to people like Tim Lowe that you really need to write tests for all your questions. And if you do that, then we'll handle the upgrade for you. And well, mostly, if something's broken, we sometimes need to go back to Tim and say, "Oh, we need to fix this question."
So if you can really test all questions in one.
Yes. So actually, this is what? Well, I thought I was on our test system. Maybe they're doing. Sorry, I learned this morning. It's time. Let me. If I can get there quickly, I will show you. But if I can't, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a problem related to this. So you have to be the site admin to run the tests for every question in the Moodle.
Yes.
But as a teacher on a course, you can click through the questions one at a time, which is rather inconvenient. We are looking at new tools to the question bank to allow you to test in bulk within.
But if you're the person responsible for upgrading Stack on the server, you probably have admin access. So it's there we go. Sorry, we've got a very big Moodle site. This takes some time to load.
So,
but this is going to list every course in this Moodle site and how many Stack questions you are, and then there's a link to go and run all the tests for all the Stack questions in that course.
I need to show this to our site administrator, I think.
Yes.
Because they don't get Stack updated at the moment. Something always.
This is the tool that makes it much lower risk to update Stack, because someone has to sit. Well, there is an option. There is an option at the bottom to run absolutely all the questions, which, if you've got a reasonable number, is worth doing. For us, the number is so big, we actually do it. Also, we've got some very old courses, like we don't need to run. I didn't need to do that. We don't need to run the test from 2019. We do a sample. And that gives us confidence that the upgrade is not going to cause problems. Or if it is going to cause problems for some of our questions, we know which questions, and then we can sort them out. So
I really need to talk to our site administrator soon.
Right. Okay. Jan, yes.
Sorry, can I ask about this? I am an admin for our site in Southampton. So I really love this. I must say, thank you so much for this kind of thing. I really love it. I have a question though. So if I run too many questions, it happens to me that the window times out somehow, the browser window.
Yes.
And then I cannot really see all the results, and I have to rerun the tests to get them. Is there any trick to this that I could try to employ?
Yes, there are several tricks. One trick is that when you run, Stack has a lot of caching built in. So often if you run the test once, it will go through very, very slowly. But if it does crash out and you start running it again, it then goes much, much faster. So that's not great, but that's one part. The other part is, as these tests run, they store the data in the database. Now, another plugin we have that we created is called the we have this Moodle report you can install, and as admin, you can sort of turn any chunk of SQL code into a report.
Yep, thank you. Excellent. I see where this is going.
So
Yeah, thank you.
Even if it's crashed out, you can come to this report, and this is some SQL I made up, which lists all the questions that have problems, and then also quite nicely gives you direct links to, like, go to check out those question tests or see that question in the question bank, and so on.
Wow, this is perfect. Okay, thank you.
So that's another plugin that we quite like. Well, I made it once years ago, and over the years we found it more and more useful. I should probably share our useful SQL, though it may have some OU specificness in it. Oh, yeah, it's kind of grown over the years. It's a bit horrible and complicated. If you email me, I will send it to you. I don't think I'll put it in the chat here.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'll mess around with the other stuff first, and
or any other way.
And
the other part, I think, because it is slightly silly to be doing this sort of bulk operation through a web interface. So my memory tells me that, sorry, this is getting very technical and very admin-y. This was meant to be more about being, for Stack users. So please excuse us for getting so techie. So yeah, Moodle, you can also define command line scripts. So there is also a command line script version of the same checks, and running it from the command line on your server might be more reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you can see there are a bunch of useful command line scripts for various admin tools there.
Yeah, thank you. I did know about this, but I did not. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I'll stop asking because, as you're right, this is the relevant discussion. So thank you.
This session is for all of you to learn whatever you want to learn while we're here. Yeah. So yeah, question tests, I mean, it's certainly useful for server admins. It's also useful for you as a question author. If you're going to go back to your questions after students have attempted them and maybe tweak them a bit, maybe sort of change them to add some additional feedback in certain situations, you also want to be quite sure that just as you're editing one particular question, you're not messing up the bits that used to work while adding new bits. So again, if you ever want to go back and revise your Stack questions, having the question tests also serves to help your own kind of confidence that the changes you're doing are safe. Right, would anyone else like to ask a question?
I think with Moodle, with Stack 4, there was something about input of external files. I tried to get it to work, but for some reason with our Stack, it never worked until now.
Yeah, number 7 in this list. So we have now the option of including both code into the key values, the question variables, from an external address, as long as the server can reach that address, and then compile those into the question. So you could have libraries that you can load into, and a similar version for the question text as well. So you could bring a template that contains whatever plots you want, the stylings and whatnot.
Yeah. I'm wondering, did we add an admin setting so the admin can control which, whether that's allowed? I'm wondering if that's not.
There's no setting at this moment.
Oh, okay. So it is unlimited. Okay.
Yeah, because for some reason I never get it to work with really small external files. But well, then I try to continue with that one.
Assuming that you have Stack 4.4.1.
Yeah. 4.4.1, not 4.4.0.
Yeah, the 0 might have some issues related to that.
I see. But I think our test server runs 4.4.1 and I don't get it to work there.
Okay, well.
Okay, but I'll try to continue with that one. Is it possible to load Maxima files then? like the graph files and things like that?
Yeah, it can load any Maxima code, not Lisp, of course, as long
great.
as it is valid for Stack. So all the security constraints of Stack apply to all the loaded things as well. So you can bring in Maxima libraries if you want.
Yeah, but probably not the graphs. Like I guess.
Yeah, it's not like the load command of Maxima that won't be allowed for now.
Is there any chance that like graphs will be included in Stack in the future?
It's always possible, but general load of absolutely anything like the graphs library is not going to happen very soon. So the graphs library is a special case in the sense that it doesn't serialize those graphs into text that we could handle. So
I see.
they don't exist similar objects.
Sorry, Matty. The reason we need to use special plot commands for Stack is because the Maxima generates the plot.
No, I don't. I'm not talking about plot
sorry.
commands.
Sorry. That's the graph. Yes, yes. I am a mathematician, really. I do remember what a graph is, but yes, I was just temporarily confused.
But I think the plugins are Lisp code.
Yeah, the graphs library has a specific note about it in the documentation.
Right,
so we know this issue. It has been an issue for the last 10 years. We still don't know how to fix it.
Let's see.
But maybe someday. Yeah.
So just to say, I was talking before about the international, sorry. As of 2 days ago, the button on my mouse has stopped clicking reliably. It's extremely annoying. That's why things don't quite respond to me always. So this is what I was saying about the International Advisory Board. Here you can see who they are. And then, as I say, if you're using Stack, there is now an email list of everyone with an interest in Stack. So if you're not on that email list, I would recommend it.
I will join.
Yeah. So there are the reach out to Chris or Konstantina and they will add you.
That sounds good.
So and Andreas there is the person I worked with on that question import plugin. Right, does anyone else have a question? I'm happy to go on answering questions as long as you like, but then when we come to a natural end, we can stop, as Humpty Dumpty would say.
Yeah, so we know this is an issue, but maybe someone else will create a graph theory package that represents the graphs in some other format, and then we could function with it. But for now, unfortunately, it just doesn't work.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming to this session and thank you for your attention. But I think if there are no further questions, I'll wrap it up now and